Hey everyone! Welcome back to Story Hive channel, your go-to place for the best Reddit stories on the web. If you love diving into amazing tales, crazy confessions, and heartwarming moments from Reddit, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Let's jump into today's story. I'm getting married, and my family is trying to get my golden child sister to walk down the aisle in white. I'm going to get my revenge here. I am writing this long tale on my honeymoon, but it does feel cathartic to finally type it out. My husband is more excited about this than the resort drinks. Anyway, this is a throwaway because I don't have a Reddit account. My husband, the Reddit fanatic, said he doesn't want this associated with his username. As to why the Reddit guy isn't the one writing this, it's because he said, since it's my family, I should be the one with the honor of posting the story. But he's over my shoulder to help out. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if this works, but I do not give permission for this to be reposted anywhere else. I think first it's necessary to give some background to explain how this behavior reached this level and why our responses were as they were. It's a long read. I apologize. Ever since I can remember, my parents loved my sister more. I don't mean in subtle ways either. If my sister accused me of something, they'd believe it and punish me. If I accused her, they wouldn't believe me, even if there was undeniable proof. They'd still give her a lesser punishment and try to find a way to scold me in tandem. My birthday cake had to be a flavor she wanted. Mine did not. My parents always denied knowing I didn't like that type of cake. They always bought her a bit more than for me. We went to where she wanted, even if it was an event that should be about me. My sister grew up spoiled and didn't like me. She just used me as a punching bag. At first, she mostly ignored me, but then it got really bad when we were young teens. I'm not sure what the cause and effect are, but she found herself with no friends, and her behavior got worse. Did her friends move? Did they ditch her because she was mean? I don't know because we were never close. My parents loved to boast about her achievements, but never ever mentioned any issues. Whereas with me, they loved to bring out any flaws of mine constantly as teasing material. I only knew she had none because we went to the same school, and I noticed she was no longer walking around with people. Anyway, she had no friends. I did. I used to be decently popular. My sister realized that, and suddenly I stopped being the occasional punching bag and became a hated person she needed to take down at all times. She started accusing me of more stuff. She accused my friends of more stuff. My parents stopped allowing me to hang out with anyone. The excuses ranging from, they're not good people according to your sister, to, why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time? What saved me from complete isolation was extended family. Most of my family lived in the same hometown, and I got along with my cousins despite some age difference. At one gathering, they invited me over to something I don't remember. I sadly replied that I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. When asked why, my kid self with no filter replied that it was because I wasn't allowed to have friends since my sister didn't have any. Well, that reached the adults, who apparently tore my parents apart. Later, I was scolded for lying and grounded as if I had anywhere to go for a month. But after that, they allowed me some leeway, so it was worth it. My sister changed schools. I guess the humiliation of extended family knowing her social status was bad, and she demanded to be changed. My parents immediately obliged, even though it cost them more since the school was further away. She made friends at the new school. However, she never went back to the previous status quo of mostly ignoring me. I guess having felt the power of how badly she could screw with me and anger that I told family she had no friends, she never let me go. My life was still bad. Her friends would come over and bully me, and my parents called it light teasing. I never called friends over because my parents were awful hosts to them, or my sister would accuse them of taking stuff, and they'd believe it. I did become close to my cousins, though, since my parents never dared do any of that to family. Then I got my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him home at all, but my parents insisted. Well, at one point, we were separated, and he came to find me to tell me my sister was flirting with him. By which he meant she came over in skimpy clothing, batting her eyelashes really badly, and started telling him how bad I was and how good she was. He was irked and ran off to find me. Of course, my sister told my parents a different tale. That my boyfriend had instead tried to flirt with her, but she naturally refused since how could she do that to me? Guess who my parents believed? Now, my boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I immediately believed him for a mean reason. But remember that back then, I was a teen and suffering from the unfair bad treatment. I was very resentful and moody and now hated my sister as much as she hated me. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about looks. I hadn't mentioned them yet because they weren't relevant. My parents were and are overweight, and since they liked showing love via food, giving you more food, buying treats, etc., my sister was and is also overweight, whereas I was and am not. In fact, I've always been kind of skinny because punishment often included no treats or snacks. Obviously, weight isn't what matters, personality is. But my sister, even then, was already rude and spoiled. Even her flirting attempts were bad because she never learned to work for anything she could demand, and my parents would deliver. Added to that was the fact that she didn't look like some sexy model. Even my self-conscious teen self didn't believe my boyfriend would try and cheat on me with her. Anyway, my parents prohibited me from dating such a horrible boy. I did try to keep going in secret, but it was hard, and the relationship ended. I did get another boyfriend, but again, my sister accused him of flirting with her when he refused her advances. Again, my parents believed her. I tried pointing out how this happened again, but they decided that meant I was incapable of making good choices and kept picking bad boyfriends. The relationship couldn't handle the Romeo-Juliet situation and fizzled out. Again, I would eventually get called a slut in high school as I was fine with making out with boys and such but refused to have relationships. Thankfully, it never got back to my sister or parents. No, my sister did bring one boyfriend home during all this time. He was paraded with pride, and my parents spent every second telling me how good he was and why couldn't I be like my sister and find myself someone like that. Until he stopped showing up and suddenly, he was a conniving bastard that tricked my sister. Oh well. The unequal treatment continued. At this time, she had more spending money. Her curfews were much better than mine. She was free to go anywhere at any time while I couldn't. If I pointed it out, my parents would say it was because she was older. But when I reached that age, I still didn't have the same treatment she had. And when pointed out, they'd deny they ever said that, or claim it was because I couldn't be trusted like she was. Using my sister's accusations against my boyfriend and friends as proof of my bad judgment. Time goes by, and it's time for my sister to graduate. She was accepted into a college, not a very well-regarded one, and she had no scholarship or anything. Again, because only her achievements were told to me, I don't know which colleges she even tried for, so I can't say how badly she was rejected. I do know her grades were bad in school, though, because whenever she got a B, we would celebrate. I would usually get good grades, but my parents refused to celebrate, claiming that since I always got those, what was there to celebrate? My parents naturally made a lot of fanfare and told her they'd pay for everything. I was relieved she'd be going away, not that it made my life any easier. She'd always come home every other weekend, and somehow stuff kept missing from her room or some other issue she'd think of to make my life miserable. My curfews were still strict, etc. Eventually, my mom came to talk to me about my impending graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister. She told me since they were paying for my sister's college, they had no money to pay for mine. So it would be better for me to start working immediately after graduation and wait until my sister finished university to see if they could afford something for me. Oh, and if I decided to stay at home, I'd have to pay for all my stuff, part of the bills, and rent. I pointed out I could get student loans. Mom said yes, except no. Mom, that is because they were so caring towards me and I had such bad judgment. They would decide if a college was worth my getting in debt or not. I'm not sure how they'd stop me from getting loans, but I didn't ask. Scholarships weren't mentioned. They had no idea what my grades were anymore and never believed in my capabilities anyway. I didn't bat an eyelid. I simply said, okay. I didn't bat. My mom clearly didn't expect that and kept pushing. Maybe she hoped I'd throw a tantrum so they'd have an excuse to not ever pay for my college. But I said nothing except I understood their position, thanked them for caring, and that was that. My dad later tried the same, but I also refused to be emotional. You see, after a whole lifetime of their terrible parenting, I never had any expectations towards my education. I knew they would find an excuse to not pay for mine and make my life miserable. I never believed they would eventually pay if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for college for a long time. I could barely go out. My friendships were slim. So I had a lot of time to study, and study I did because I saw college as my only chance to be free. Well, the time came, and I worked my ass off and got a scholarship, not to anywhere like Ivy League or anything like law or medical school, but it was a good enough course in a decent college with a full scholarship. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to stop me via my parents, I put my achievement on social media. At the same time, I told them, even forced myself to thank them in the post. Now they couldn't forbid me from going, as they'd have to explain to family why not. Initially, they were even a little proud and boasting about it. Then, I guess my sister got to them, and they changed gears and even asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. They let slip that my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than me, I'd suffer worse. I obviously stuck to my guns. They weren't happy but couldn't do anything. College was my savior. I started being happy. I still contacted my parents and visited on holidays and such, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could excuse not going a lot due to money. During this time, I avoided introducing any man to them, and my sister stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate because, again, they'd have made a fanfare about it, moved back home, paying no bills or rent. But it's different, my parents said, and started working at the same company as my mom. Obviously, thanks to my mom pulling strings, this was all sold to me as a source of pride. Oh well. Almost there, I promise. I met my husband around this time. You know those people that say that if they were in X situation, they'd have done something? My husband is the type that really does. I'm the person that is meek and a doormat in any situation, and then can't sleep at night wishing I had done something, had thought of something witty to say, etc. I'm the person that can't help but cry when I'm angry. My husband is the guy that claps back immediately. He loves drama and resolving it. He's the guy that if he doesn't immediately reply to a slight, you better start worrying because he won't forgive and forget. He's just doing something worse for revenge. He's the one that wanted me to post here and wanted to post on a nuclear revenge board too, but decided what we did wasn't nuclear. People were baffled I got together with him, but just because I was incapable, thanks to my upbringing probably, of acting like him, it didn't mean I didn't like it. I love that my husband does what I can't, and he treats people well as long as they do the same to him. When we discussed marriage, we decided we didn't care much about the ceremony due to our budget, as we'd rather spend on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. As for where to do it, since his family was spread out and mine was still mostly concentrated in my hometown, we decided to do it there. We weren't living too far off either, so we could take some long trips during the weekends to manage stuff. Plus, there was some work flexibility, so we could stay in my hometown for a bit too if needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. At this point, my parents naturally demanded they meet my man. I wanted to grow a spine and refuse, but was having a hard time. The distance had made me think maybe my parents weren't so bad. Well, my husband looked like I canceled Christmas when I told him I would at least ensure they were never alone with him. See, he had been getting ready for this. He even bought a high-quality recorder he could hide in his pocket to record it all. He was stoked, thinking of all the ways he could refuse my sister's advances, insult her, and then spread the recording of her attempts to my family. So off he went, alone and excited to meet them, and came back later euphoric. Babe, you won't believe the awful they wanted. Babe, we can mess them over so bad. There are so many possibilities. I was confused and wanted to hear the recording, but he smartly told me it was better to listen to him first or else I'd misunderstand him. Well, he went there and instead of the flirting, my parents and my sister sat him down. After some grumbling about not being okay with him, my judgment, etc., They proclaimed they were willing to pay for my wedding on one condition. My sister would walk down the aisle at my wedding first in a wedding dress. Their excuses were that it wasn't okay for a younger sister to marry first, so it was only fair if my sister had at least the experience of it on my venue with pictures being taken and the dress. And she'd have a cake later too, etc. Well, my level-headed brother scolded us for it, while he acknowledged he would never be able to convince us from retaliation. At least he showed us that something like that would be hard to pull off. Some of our other ideas were also at risk of getting us sued, so we eventually settled for the most benign plan. Act like we agreed, but then hire security and don't let her in. Obviously, if that was all, it wouldn't be pro-revenge. The rest is mostly my husband's doing, but he wants me to do the honors, so here goes. It's important to mention that everything he did was previously discussed with me and were our mutual ideas. He went back to my parents and said he probed and thought I wouldn't be down with it. However, he didn't see the issue and, not wanting the family to fall apart, would be down to helping them do it. He pointed out that I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised with it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of all the people. On the other hand, marriage is a big thing, so who knew if I'd lash out? Thus, he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for stuff, so I would feel even more pressure not to say anything. Not only would we be public, with our families there, but I'd be grateful for the help they gave, and that would mollify me. He said my parents looked surprised by my grown sister starting to skip with joy, literally like a kid, so it was accepted. Important. My husband also claimed that due to some bad judgment in past boyfriends, these words were all my idea, and I'm so proud of using their words against them. I was distrustful and controlling and liked to check his phone and stuff to ensure he wasn't cheating on me. As such, it was imperative that nothing of this plan was ever put in writing. For any discussion pertaining to my sister walking down the aisle before me, he'd go over to their house to talk. And so began the months of deception where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, and my husband and I were milking them. Rather than paying for the wedding, they laid low. Of course, my parents wanted input in everything, some stuff that meant a lot to me, like the songs and color palette. My husband would convince them to let it go to keep me in line. But since we never really cared for the ceremony to begin with, everything else was game, or so they thought. What we did was thus. We'd go to check the drink and menu options, then accept the lowest or second lowest priced option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to also try it out, then sigh and say it's a pity we don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill, so we wouldn't get the best options. Cue my sister demanding my parents pay for the best. My parents would then tell me not to worry, and they'd pay for the most expensive. The same was done with the photographer and flowers. My husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we wanted, then sadly expressed how I wanted some other tasteless flowers. Cue my parents telling me they wanted us to go with said flowers, and they'd pay for it. The wedding dress hit a minor snag here. My parents wanted me to use a hideous dress. Okay, not outright hideous, but it wasn't my style and wouldn't look that good on me. We had planned on saying yes, then simply not using it. But my mom sent me a message about it, so there'd be proof. I said okay. We had to go with me refusing in text and standing my ground. My husband went over there and said he'd see what he could do. My sister suggested ruining my desired dress so I'd be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to agree. During all this time, they really kept communications outside of any text. We made sure that it happened by when my sister tried messaging my husband. I had him reply to her. This solidified that I'm controlling and neurotic, claims my husband was making, so they believed it and never risked anything in writing. Maybe some people might not like the thought of their partner going around and talking badly about them to family. But I'm such a doormat that the thought of being painted as this controlling and dangerous person is extremely funny to me. And I egged him on to do it. I guess I have a warped sense of humor. Oh, and my sister did try to flirt with him, but he acted conflicted. Also, to really sell that he was with them, my husband would pretend to tell them things without my knowledge. But he never told them we hired security. It was really funny. My husband and I, who had sincerely considered a courthouse wedding to focus cost on our honeymoon, having this extravagant, expensive wedding and barely spending a dime. We called it back pay for emotional damages from my parents. I think my husband, okay, he just confirmed I'm right, was enjoying the whole tricking them more than planning our wedding. I didn't think it was possible to witness a guy beaming at the thought of wasting his whole Saturday doing a car trip to discuss wedding details with his in-laws, but here we are. Soon, the day came. The plan my parents, sister, and husband had come up with was to wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride always comes out late, they'd have my sister arrive at that precise time to avoid me seeing her and trying to stop it. She walked down the aisle. By the time I heard what happened, it'd be too late to do anything. As for my dress, we saved some of the leftover fabric from my dress alterations. My husband took that to my parents' place, since my sister still lives with them even now. He showed them as proof he'd ruined the dress. Then he said he had to go back to me, as I was raging and he needed to calm me down. He'd see them at the wedding. After they all went down and took their places, my dad stood up at the entrance as if waiting for me. During this, a friend not in the wedding party texted me to get ready. This was because if my husband or bridesmaids, etc., took out a phone and started texting, people might notice. This friend was in on the plan. She's my husband's friend, as willing to help stir drama as he is, and didn't care about being a bridesmaid or anything. Well, as soon as my dad took his position, the bridal song started playing, the doors opened, and I came in. My dad looked astonished at me being there. He tried glancing behind me, but you can't see the venue entrance from where we were, so he couldn't see what happened to my sister. Then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID, and it was her. He just left me there with a mumbled something came up. There were gasps and confusion all around. The friend in on it loudly asked what happened. I lied and, in a teary voice, said he told me it wasn't supposed to be me there. It's not what he said, but my husband and I agreed that if he dared leave me, I should say that to make him look the worst possible. As for the tears, I wish I could say it was just my stellar acting, but no. Despite everything, a part of me didn't think he'd go as far as abandoning me there, that the sister thing wasn't true, but an elaborate joke. I don't know. I was hurt, still am, so I was sincerely trying not to cry. The friend then loudly went, "What did he mean by it shouldn't be you?" so that as many people as possible could hear and spread it. Then went, "I will go and check," and ran off. We decided to do this to make her create hell with the security and stop my dad from coming back and stopping the ceremony or something. At some point, my mom also left. At this point, my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned he might need to. Watching him run desperately to me helped me smile. I walked down the aisle to whispers as people discussed what happened. Some apparently left to check too. When I reached my husband, though, all was well. He made me feel better, joking my sad face was so real I deserved an Oscar. He told me not to worry, he'd rake them over the coals for what they did. We got married without a hitch. My parents didn't come back. I did notice a lot of people leaving and then coming back during the party, but no one dared tell me what was happening. Someone did come and whisper in my husband's ear, and he went out. He came back after a while with a thunderous expression, but whispered in my ear he needed to go hide somewhere before he broke character and started smiling. Well, what happened is that it worked. The following is a summed account from friends who stayed. The security guard, who I should note was genuinely hired as a bodyguard but wasn't entirely professional about it, was loud and disruptive. After my dad and mom left, they went to my sister, who'd been stuck in the car with our fake messages about the dress or my mother being mad about the dress before my dad left. In reality, my husband and I made her call, so she was stuck in traffic. My dad and mom arrived at the front, but were told by the security guard they couldn't get in. They called the police, who came and were unable to do anything as there was no trouble inside, and rather, it was an ongoing argument. The guests kept them out until the police left. Then, my dad threatened to get back in and sue the security guard. The security guard told them to leave before calling the police again, and my dad finally told the security guard to get away from him. All this while, my mom was in tears, trying to call the venue to check if they had any records of my sister being let in. The police had given up by then, leaving the venue to sort it out. It became a mess of gossip. My sister tried to climb over the fence and was quickly escorted away by police. My mom then broke down and my dad had a fit. They ended up going home as they couldn't get in and figured out something was up when my sister couldn't see the dress they were so proud of ruining. After the wedding, my mom started sending me multiple messages, mostly the same ones over and over. She said she's mad at me for a lot of things and that I'm selfish for depriving her of her daughter's wedding. She also accused me of having more influence over my husband than she ever thought. It was a beautiful mess. I kept screenshots of everything and sent them to my dad with the sad message that I am sorry for the things he tried doing to me. My dad apologized and said he knew the wedding was a farce from the start, but that it was only my sister's doing. I'm guessing my mom also got a lot of hate mail and used it to get him to stop talking. Either way, my dad tried to apologize to me, but I didn't want to. They tried to make me feel bad and also accused me of using them for my wedding, but they ended up getting what was coming. It wasn't as hard to pull off as they expected, just had to get my husband to go with their ideas and pretend we'd never considered what we were doing to be a plan. Thanks for tuning into today's Reddit story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss out on more amazing stories. See you next time.